Move your curtain. Good morning and welcome to this edition of our midday program, Press R. The President of the Republic is back in the country, and this is after his participation at the Africa-China Summit, or Sino-African Summit, which took place in Beijing a couple of weeks back. We'll be discussing not that visit or the outcome of that the continent of Africa and China meeting, but what has been going on in the country. And we'll begin with the social media and what's happening to our people west of the Mungo. A massive exodus are here, and not hearing, but the media has been able to prove that. What's the role of the social media in that, and is it true, some of the allegations they are making? But we'll focus on hate speech. Hate language, others who want to put it. And the National Communication Council during the week organized a workshop or seminar workshop, whichever you take it, for media practitioners to try to help them understand what it means and try to see how they can curb hate speech within their different media organs. Is it only within the media, or we have that hate speech elsewhere? We'll try to find out, and we're glad to announce to you that we have the President of the National Communications Council with us on the program this midday. You're welcome, Mr. Peter Isoka.
Thank you, Joe, for inviting me.
We also have Father Gilles Ngwafonte. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
The church has been playing a very I would say important role in our society, and many people are asking why they, in spite of the several fastings and prayer nights and days and weeks and what have you, the crisis.
Well, the church continues to exhort its children to seek the way of dialogue and peace. And the prayers we are saying, God is answering the prayers. We submit to God, and God will answer and act at the most opportune time. And when God speaks, all human beings will be silent.
And in spite, one would have thought that by now the crisis would have been abated because of the pleas or the submissions or the complaints which we all have been tabling to God.
Man must always submit and open his heart to God's word, and that word continues to ring. It is for us right now to open our hearts so that God's word would enter and transform us. So the church does its part to continue to preach the gospel in season and out of season, and each one of us sitting here must ask whether we have opened our hearts to accept the word of God and allow that word of God to transform us.
Okay, we have another pastor with us, but before that, it's Tewi Lambeef, Pastor Masok of the Presbyterian Church. He just made mention about preaching the word. At one point, the church was being seen as an accomplice in the ongoing crisis, that the church did not speak out against what was happening.
No, I think we have spoken. The other day I was preaching in our congregation, and I cited a sermon preached in 1980 by the very Reverend Dr. Nyansako Ninko, calling Cameroonians to keep God and for God to keep them. That was 1980. So I think the church has spoken.
No, Cameroonians have always kept God. But the point here, it has to do with the crisis.
Yes, I think we have spoken enough, and we are still speaking. We are praying the right prayers, and God is answering the prayers.
But the problems keep going.
Yes, prayers does not say problems don't exist. And I think if we were not praying, it would have been worse.
At one point, one is tempted to think like others. So the man on the street will say, hey, it looks like God is not listening to us.
Now, God listens. There are many ways in which God can answer people. The compassion that we are extending to accommodate those who are ahead, that's another way of God answering the people. Indeed, we are God's angels of comfort in times like this. The prayers we pray continually soften the minds of the people. Some would have actually gone extreme, but because of the prayers, they haven't gone. And I think...
would you call that a response to your pleas from God?
The response to prayer is never ultimate. sometimes God can answer you piecemeal.
Okay. We'll be coming back to that shortly. Let's turn to what the papers have been feeding on. Our press review.
The papers this week carried stories of the head of state's presence at the China-Africa Forum. From the government bilingual daily Cameroon Tribune to private papers like The Post, The Voice and The Horizon, these tabloids in their headlines treated the China-Africa Summit in different angles, while Cameroon Tribune focused on the perfect relations between China and Cameroon, the lobby for foreign investors by President Paul Biya, and the new era opened for Xi Jinping's China and Paul Biya's Cameroon.
Newspapers this week are again covered with the latest reports on the over 2.5-year socio-political upheaval in the northwest and southwest regions, as Cameroon Tribune reports on women in Bamenda crying for peace to return to the region and for the end to bloodshed. The Post newspaper is interested in what it headlines Armed Men Halt Movement to and from Bamenda. The paper refers to the trench that was dug across the road, leaving travelers stranded in Akum. This leads the lone English daily The Guardian Post to question how effective military action against Ambazonian fighters is. The same worry is shared by Newswatch in its headline, Is Military Response to Ambazonian Fighters' Onslaught Inefficient? The Horizon newspaper rather proposes the way out of the crisis, writing, Dialogue, not strong armed tactics is way out. The same paper goes further to announce the ban on night travel to Bamenda and a dusk to dawn curfew in the region. This at a time the Post Weekender reports that bottlenecks have made ID card acquisition a nightmare in the northwest and southwest regions. Then politics occupy another chunk of newspaper columns. Cameroon Tribune, running a series of reports on the state of Cameroon, presents the major resolutions of the governor's first semester meeting in Yaoundé. Special security measures before, during and after the October 7 presidential poll take center stage. But the Guardian Post takes interest in the views of former CPDM ally Albert Zonga, who according to him the CPDM candidates cannot win elections if they are free and fair. But the Post newspaper takes its readers to the Meme CPDM secret meeting, which it reports has sparked animosity. The paper makes reference to a recent CPDM gathering in the Meme division, which, because of the tense atmosphere, could not receive members out of Kumba, while the meeting was kept away from public eye. The interest of the Horizon is rather on the views of Gaga Amanaji, promising amnesty to the CPDM candidate in case he wins elections. Newswatch publishes government's disclaimer on the alleged internet shutdown in the northwest and southwest regions during elections. The rising proportion of hate speech in the media landscape in Cameroon become worrisome, and the watchdog, the National Communication Council, steps in with a sensitization seminar. Cameroon Tribune reports that the NCC proposed measures to tackle hate speech given its diverse effects in society. This taking place at a time the Post newspaper reports on the U.S. Embassy's training of Cameroonian journalists on electoral coverage. The attack of gunmen on the Russian ambassador to Cameroon that left the diplomat with injuries in Yaoundé, plus the International Transport Workers Syndicate's petition of the Cameroon government over torture of striking port workers in Douala, together with the seizure of 3 boats from pirates in Bakassi and the buzz created by a 5e textbook in the French subsystem of education, are also stories reported by newspapers this week. We now end our press review on the story by the Guardian Post, in which 2 brothers accused of murdering their employer's son after they were sacked to pay the employer back for sacking them are under police custody in Johong in the Adamawa region of Cameroon. Until we meet again, this is your hour with the press.
Thank you, Emanuela. We're sorry for the mix-up at the beginning of the program, but let's just swing on. Reverend Masok, or any one of you, is there anybody who doesn't go online, on the social media nowadays, to read some of those?
No, we go online.
Everybody goes online.
Okay, everybody goes online. So what's the problem with the social media today? It looks like it has come to stay, in spite of all the negative aspects or things which are spoken about the social media.
Yes, it has come to stay because it's part of the evolution of our civilization, in spite of some of its negatives. I think there are some also positive things there. So I think it has come to stay.
Okay. And we witnessed the last days of last week a lot of massive exodus, and this was triggered by information on the social media. Would you say the people were reacting too much to such information, or that was they have a right to begin to react to information of that nature on the social media?
Well, what I can say now, Joe, is that whether we like it or not, we have to live with the social media. And I think what should be of import now is what use do we make of the social media? How do we appropriate it to reflect our own realities? To fight it would be getting head on to the wall, because you can't, in this world of today,
it's like
pretend.
Like trying to stop the wind with your palm.
It's impossible. There is no way. You just have to adapt to it and make good use of it, appropriate it and make good use of it. Now, coming back to your question, that the social media carry information on the exodus, it's probably because the traditional media, in its gatekeeping role, is trying to be a little cautious on carrying that kind of information. But is the option not to carry it at all? Because when the classical traditional media doesn't carry it, of course people have the option of going to the social media, which becomes viral, which even goes faster than the classical traditional media. So nobody can today pretend that he can live without the social media from top to bottom.
Okay. Now, Reverend Father Giles, what was the reality in your church today? Did you see new faces because they came in from the northwest and southwest?
Yes, many faces. And when I visit my Christians, I meet homes that have grown from 2 to 20, from 5 to 10, all filled with people who are fleeing from the violence and seeking refuge here. In the church today, we saw so many of them, and that is the reality we are living now.
Now, the governors of the two regions were saying, don't fear, don't run, don't run. Do these people have any reason to begin to move or to fear or to run away from their homes?
Yes, they have reasons. They are living an experience, the experience of violence. The governor is well protected. The people are not. They live in the quarters, and they have an experience. You know, experience speaks to the person who lives it. Rather, what the governor should do should be able to make present those structures that can assure the people that staying on the spot, they will be protected.
Now, when you see a red beret or a green beret or a black beret, this is supposed to come from the defense and security forces of the country, is that not reassuring to the ordinary person? We are having a crisis of confidence, and throughout this crisis, the people have experienced brutality, even from those who are supposed to be protecting them. And so right now, they doubt if the military will be different from the others who are also carrying out acts of violence. The present crisis would have been solved quite easily if the people had confidence in the military.
they would have been able to stay on the spot and counted on the protection of the military. But the reality on the ground is that people doubt, and at times when they hear that the military is coming, they flee. We cannot discard their previous experiences of having been intimidated and brutalized and their homes destroyed by those who are expected to protect them.
Now, when he says what he says, and the military is supposed to count on the ordinary citizen to be able to protect them appropriately or effectively, what's your reaction to that? And secondly, are you not safer being at home than moving out of home?
Well, if moving out of home, you get to an environment where you're safe, and if you don't move, you don't feel safe. Like Father Giles was saying, if the people who are supposed to protect you come with an element of violence or brutality, you definitely will be afraid of them. The movement, I think the question that you asked right from the beginning, whether it is the social media, that is, you see, yes. the social media generally has become like the authentic information giver, even where that information is not verified. And immediately it appears on the social media, there are people who take it for gospel and they act immediately on it. I think the education we could have been given people, and we continue to give them, is, hey, everything that is on social media is not what you should act on. Rationalize on whatever information that comes on the social media, but because if not, we'll have a whole country running helter-skelter.
That's where I was coming to.
Because running helter-skelter, because there's a lot of information that goes on the social media that could cause a rebellion.
Now, what if we were to tell those who are watching us and who watch the social media as well, who read things, what would you tell them in relation to information which they get on the social media?
You see, Joe, things have become such that it's even difficult to tell them anything, because everybody now believes in whatever they want to believe. Now, telling them, they'll consider you a joke. They say, hey, when you say we should not run from here, and when we go this way, there is the military. When we turn the other way, there is, quote-unquote, the Amber Boys. Where do they go? So they find a way, they try to find a way out. They try to find a way out. And the only way is running out of that area where you would not confront neither the military nor the Amber Boys. And there's a lot of crossing. People are crossing to Nigeria, and a majority of them are crossing over to the other regions around.
You're not part of the administration of the two regions, but what now happens to those who are brave and stay?
What?
Those who have decided to stay?
Well, I think it's a choice.
Must have the courage.
No. It's a choice, and courage too. It's a choice. Father Giles was saying a little while ago that, for instance, the governor or some of the administrative people are protected somehow, although there is no guarantee even when there is protection, because people who are protected have been attacked and killed. I mean, it even crossed over. I mean, the Secretary General at the presidency was attacked, even in here. So there's a possibility that whether you are protected or not protected, you could be attacked. But it's just your faith to stay and hope that, as the pastor said a little while ago, God is listening to us and he would intervene at his own time.
Okay. Except you wanted to say anything, I want us to watch this.
I want to say something, Joe, that concerning the appeal from the administrative authorities for people to stay back. I say action speaks louder than words. I would, to buttress the point Mr. Peter Isoka was just making, we must be honest to ourselves to say that some of these administrative authorities are not actually living in those areas. They sneak in virtually and sneak out, despite the protection that they have. We have had instances. You remember the DO who was kidnapped in Batibo? He's an administrative authority up till today. He's never busy. If administrative authorities who are supposedly protected can be attacked, can disappear, can be killed, the minister delegate in charge of defense, his convoy was attacked. The minister in charge of basic education the other week was attacked. What more of ordinary citizens? I think you should, instead of the administration telling them not to go as if it was an injunction, let them go where they can feel safe. People have freedom.
That would be going contrary. How do you accommodate that?
People have freedom of movement. If you don't feel comfortable, it is you who wears the shoes who knows where the shoes pinches most.
Somebody made a joke that the governor at the park was appealing to people with so many military people around him. If he were safe, he wouldn't come with so many military people at the My 17 park the other day.
Okay. So I think let's just watch. You wanted to chip in something?
I was going to say the social media is a valuable instrument in our hands, and it has enormous potential for good and for evil. And what people believe to be real is real in its consequences. And what we need to do is to look for confidence-inspiring mechanisms on the ground to be able to assure people that being on the spot, their lives will be safe. And I think that is the job which the administrative machinery has to do. It is not an easy job, but they are called to do that.
Okay. Let's see what was happening in the Northwest and the Southwest yesterday in this report, a joint report.
The governor's message to the population of the Northwest region comes in the wake of persistent rumors and social media allegations of an impending mayhem that will soon hit the region. Propagators of all this maintain that the situation will be marked by a blackout in movement into and out of the Northwest region.
I am hereby making a clarion call and reassuring the general population of their security and safety, and to ask the civil servants to go to their respective workplaces, the teachers and people to be in school, and business people to go about their economic activities in all calm and serenity, as the administration, as a good father, is watching over them.
While calling on separatist fighters to lay down their arms and be reintegrated into the society, the governor also used his media outing to warn proprietors of travel agencies, private cars, and commercial motorbikes that any of them caught transporting those he termed terrorists and harmful weapons will be dealt with accordingly.
There are fake news saying that the army will launch an attack. No, the army are not launching attacks. The army are there to protect the population and their property, and the army is there to neutralize those attacks. They are normal people who are traveling for business, for many other activities. We cannot stop them to travel. But those who are abandoning their homes, you can see here the luggages, you have beds, furnitures. No, where are they going? No, we want them to stay at home.
One of the things which happened within the week was this idea of the fake hate speech. How would you describe hate speech or hate language, Tewi?
Well, hate speech or hate language is language that promotes hatred, that is based on stigmatizing a group of persons because of their origins. It is despising people. It is disrespecting people. It is insulting people because of who they are and where they come from. Put simply, that is it.
Okay. Is there any other way you'd want to, anything you'd want to add?
I think Reverend Masok was a participant at the seminar that was organized last Tuesday. And he defines this as anti-love.
Yes.
That is, you hate because you don't love. If you loved, you wouldn't hate. And anybody who is using that kind of language or speech, like Terry said a while ago, means you don't like that other person. Not necessarily groups or tribes or whatever. If I hate you, I hate you. I don't love you. So hate is a sentiment, a negative sentiment against what we may call love.
Okay. Reverend Masok, you are here in person, so how would you define hate language or hate speech?
Yeah, it's insultive, it incites, it's prejudicial, can be very misleading. It is meant to provoke people to do the wrong thing, especially to be engaged in violence or that which can destabilize. It is provocative, as I earlier mentioned, and it is intentional. It is an antithesis to social morality, and I think it contradicts even the gospel of Jesus Christ that calls us to love one another. In my conversation at the national seminar, I said love regulates our conduct, and if we were to engage in love, we would not be involved in hate speech. So hate speech is an antithesis to existing social norms that bind society to function in a proper manner.
Okay. Would you want to add something?
Yes, it is any expression that vilifies a person or an identifiable group of persons based on their ethnic origin, their religion, their political ideology, and it is meant to cause harm to those people, either through negative discrimination or through violence.
Now, how would you try to put that in perspective, given that the government is preaching living together, and we have the rise in hate speech? Does that not contradict somehow?
Absolutely, there is a contradiction, and that is what we were trying to show when we organized the seminar. The whole period, I mean, for the last how many months or years we've been talking about living together and so forth by the government. Now, some media houses take upon themselves to preach hatred, xenophobia, and call it what you want. The National Communication Council, which is supposed to take action or regulate the content of even language on the media, comes up with decisions and sanctions. And the same institutions that are supposed to put in place or help in executing such sanctions or decisions seem to put them aside. And certain media take upon themselves to stand out as untouchable. And when you do, of course, hell breaks loose. And so the contradiction comes. If the state would want to take action, some measures have to be taken in order to stop some of those media houses from doing some of the things that they're doing. Yes.
You are an arm of the state meant to regulate such hate speech. When what you're saying comes out, it looks like there is some dysfunction somehow.
No, there's no dysfunctioning. The Communication Council has a role to play. You identify the problem. You note it. You call on it to stop. But through the creation or reorganization of that council, your decisions have to go through another process. And it is during that process where some of those sanctions meted out are not executed. The council has played its role. There is another set of people within that same institution, that state, that have to play the next role.
Okay, I'll be coming back to you shortly, but let me ask this question. Where is hate speech predominant? Within the media, political circles, on the streets of our country, or it's just everywhere?
It's everywhere, but magnified by the media.
Okay, it looks like yes, it looks like you people are all agreed because it was a force. Yes. Okay, now how would you explain this emergence or rise in hate speech, Reverend?
You know, there are grievances that people have had for quite some time, and at times these grievances are expressed when there are times of trials like the ones we are living. But also our civic education has not really taken into consideration this aspect of public speaking and the respect of the dignity of the person. And we haven't got dissuasive mechanisms to call people to order. I have been personally alarmed at the extent to which particular persons and groups of persons have been attacked unjustly on the media and during some particular political discourse by politicians. You hear what they say about other politicians and people from particular areas. It can be very, very devastating. And one would have expected that to guard the public conscience, measures will be taken in order to dissuade others who think about doing the same thing. But what we see is that there is a very a permissive attitude as far as this is concerned. People have been called dogs, cockroaches, rats, and during some debates, some people have taken upon themselves to qualify a whole set of people as being dull, not intelligent, not able to pass examinations. And this is done in the public sphere, and not even a discordant voice is raised to say this should not happen.
Now, when you say...
let me finish. Because at every point, the simple logic is that a part is never greater than a whole. And when you are talking about a whole, there is some respect which you must have for that whole. Because you may be an important part, but that part is never bigger than the whole.
Now, when you say what you say, and all what you have quoted are realities, do you tack the blame on some sociological composition to the society from where we come, where using raw language, I'll put it quote unquote, is acceptable? Or is that our education doesn't permit us to be able to distinguish between the person and the ideas? Or what's the problem with our society today? When you see some of those things come from people who are expected to have gone to school and can make the difference between the person, the policy, and an idea.
Well, Joe, obviously you can go to school, but the school will not go through you. I don't think these are matters that we only learn in school. Values, moral values, ethical values cannot only be learned in a formal school. They are with us. And
you mean the socialization is not one that can help us to be able to come out of this situation? I was watching a foreign channel the other day and saw the way they were drilling or questioning the Supreme Court judge that was proposed. But nobody talked on anything that had to do with this person but the ideas and what he represents. Why can't we get to that level?
Well, because of, I would call, and I'm going to be very emphatic here, because of political opportunism. If you see where hate speech has thrived, it is essentially for political reasons. Take the case of the Second World War, where Goebbels was propagating Hitler's
Joseph Goebbels.
Yes, idea of an iron race, of the race that is bigger, more superior. Take the case in Africa of the Radio Mille Collines in Rwanda that fanned the flames of the genocide that happened in Rwanda. And I think that humanity, we are not learning from it. It's so unfortunate. I don't understand why we cannot learn from the past. It's simply because we want to have some political advantage. That said, let's come back to Cameroon. This is the chairman of the National Communications Council, which is supposed to regulate, which is supposed to guard, which is supposed to act as some kind of a gatekeeper into the excesses that we find in the media. But if, let me describe him as the hunter becomes hunted, what happens? I understand he even went to court as a person, and even
sentenced to 6 months of
for doing for doing what he is paid to do.
Yes.
Then where are we going to? Is it that we give with the left hand and take back with the right hand? I cannot understand that somebody who is supposed to guard against defamation, all of that, is instead taken to court for that.
Don't you think there are others who see it as they interpret the court action as nobody being above the law, and even the president of the National Communications Council.
Not take it out of context.
Listen. I mean, maybe a little bit of explanation.
Yes.
I mean, nobody was cited in whatever statement the president of the National Communication Council made. We are here on set. You asked me a question about the situation of the media, of the social media, and you explain the situation and make reference to the fact that if this continues, we'll come up to, like Terry described, like the situation in Rwanda. Unfortunately, there are certain media houses that propagate such ideas even after they have been sanctioned, and they have refused to adhere to those sanctions, and the council, which is supposed to regulate, becomes like a lame duck because the authorities that are supposed to put that into action have failed to do it, and the people on that particular media sit with all arrogance and tell people, no matter what, we are here. To the extent where they go by saying, we can even go as far as getting into a village and clean it because we have money. That's dirt. And nobody else reacts. And the president of the National Communication Council becomes the victim, taken to court, sentenced.
fined.
No. Were you fined as the president of the National Communications Council, or you were fined? And
you cannot fine Peter Esoka as an individual. If you're taking something to court because he stands there as a representative of an institution, a state institution, and he is doing the job he's supposed to do. Now you're taking him to court as an individual. I didn't leave my house to go and make a statement on the press.
I was speaking
from the perspective of and capacity of the president of the... So, yes, if you want to take the National Communication Council to court, good and fine, not Peter Esoka. And now when you are sentencing, you're not sentencing Peter Esoka. Peter Esoka is not the institution.
Now, why did you present yourself in court?
I never did.
Okay, your lawyer did.
I have never done.
Your lawyer did.
My lawyer did. Now, if you want, it's a very delicate thing. My lawyer went to court, and the magistrate refused for him to stand and said he wanted that individual they call Peter Esoka in court.
Well, it's an attempt to humiliate.
Huh?
I think that's
that is a magistrate, like he said, going to school, but school not going through you. How would a man of the law not be able to define that law, not be able to define that differentiation between who Peter Esoka is as an individual and Peter Esoka,
the
office holder, the president of the National Communications Council?
Now, let me stay with you to say
yes.
The Communication Council is there, the Ministry of Communications is there. Unfortunately, we didn't get somebody from the Ministry of Communication to be part of the panel this afternoon. How would you distinguish the functions or the responsibilities which you have as the regulator or the National Communications Council and the Ministry of Communication?
The Ministry of Communication is political. The Minister of Communication stands out as a spokesperson of the government or of the state. The Communication Council looks into the content, the ethics, and the ontology. And when they take sanctions against a certain media house, I think, and they have an independent or some kind of independence to do that, that is given to us by the law. The independence.
Are your decisions challengeable in court?
They are. No, they are challengeable in court. The decisions are challengeable. Very many of them have been challenged, but they have not succeeded because we follow procedure. And if you follow procedure, that's it. The unfortunate thing that I'm going to say, unfortunately, to any representative of the Ministry of Communication is absent from this set, is that sometimes some media houses are sanctioned. And the same media houses go to collect money from the Ministry of Communication as assistants. Officials of the Ministry of Communication go to those media and praise them for their job, for a job well done. What a contradiction.
When they are under sanction?
Under sanction, yes, sir.
Now, sometimes it beats my imagination when I hear some of what you say, but because it's a state institution, if it were a private institution, we would say, okay, you're contradicting some state rules somehow. But how would you qualify what is going on and this idea of hate language within the context of us trying to build a united country with its diversity? Yet there are people who don't see. It means that government's effort are not being they are all in futility.
Well, I think one of the problems we have, which we must address, is the credibility of our institutions. Our institutions must be credible and must be empowered. Yes. If you look at the chain of decision taking at time, it is unnecessarily long. Some of these commissions only report. And when they report, along the line, there is a lot of corruption that may come in. And in this country, there are individuals who boast that they are stronger than institutions. Where democracy has thrived, where democracy is well developed and is making progress and creating favorable conditions for people to blossom, is where the rule of the law is upheld by all and all are subject to the law. I think that is a fundamental starting point. If those fundamentals are not in place, there is nothing you will do, because people will continue to insult others. Even with the education, there will be nothing to constrain people from using the public media, the public space, to denigrate others. And that is what we are living. So let us go back to our institutions. Fortify our institutions, make them more credible. And I tell you, nobody will be able to attack a group of people or persons. People will rather examine and evaluate ideas, ideologies. I think for me, that is a very basic starting point. Without that,
there's a lot of complicity. There's a lot of complicity.
Is it at the level of, is the complicity or the problem at the level of individuals or the lack of the institutions? Because the institutions are there. How then do we move to a stage where these institutions are empowered to be able to exercise the functions for which they were created?
Well, Joe, I think in terms of laws, we may have some of the best laws, but of what use is a good law on paper if it is not implemented? Let me go back. Let me stick with the media, where I think I work and I master most. Some of the causes of this hate speech in the media are at least 5 levels. The first level is the dominance of people from a particular group in the newsroom.
Somebody mentioned that during our paper. Yeah.
It is scientifically proven that when there is that kind of situation, there will be forced to be chaos. When there is ethnic dominance in the newsroom, it is going to reflect on the output of that media,
policy,
whether you like it or not. Secondly, there is the issue of impunity, where people do what they can do and go free. Third, there is the absence of a media self-regulatory mechanism. I think that professional peer review, if the decision from the National Communications Council were taken amongst the journalists themselves, who sit and say, come on, what you said is not correct, who would they attack?
Now,
third, let me continue. The hate speech is strong, so strong, that it's not only a law, but it's enshrined in the supreme law of the land, the Constitution. Elsewhere, it is enshrined in the Constitution of the land that every statement, no matter where it comes from, is to be condemned.
Let me say somewhere. Sorry to...
Yes, the last one before we move to Reverend.
The last one is lack of training. Lack of training. Our media professionals are not sufficiently trained. Why are they not sufficiently trained? The institutions are there, okay? But the problem is, we are in a profession that is at the same time a science and an art. Journalism is a science because it is systematic, it is methodic, it is universal, you have rules that you respect. It is an art because it is built on our innate abilities, on our talents, on our basic abilities of reading and writing. When people say that they can learn on the job, how can you learn on the job the ethics of the profession?
Okay, Reverend?
Yes, we can't treat hate speech in isolation. I think that would be an error. In my paper that I presented at the national seminar, I tried to see hate speech within the context of a very complex situation. the situation of our country has reached a very complex point. There are too many problems. They are interrelated, and hate speech could be a byproduct. It could also be a collective breakdown or failure in terms of the moral person. It could also be a way of people expressing frustration, especially when the channels of communication or dialogue are not very evident. Then people start speaking in ways that can attract attention. Indeed, we have to be very, very careful. For example, like in this whole problem that we have in the Northwest and the Southwest region, we should be honest to find out, have we communicated, have we had a proper inclusive dialogue? And when people have this internal frustration, when they have things to say, they start saying them in very crooked manner. They start saying them in ways that can attract attention. They start saying them in ways that can give them dominance when the law breaks down. People start taking the law into their hands and expressing themselves in different ways. So when the members of the panel say, this one is going wrong, this one is going wrong, I put it as a very complex, we find ourselves in a very complex situation where it's
the
like
byproduct of that complexity.
Yes, it's
now,
like the center cannot hold.
Yes, it looks like it's not only coming from within, but from without. And on the social media, we're talking about a couple of minutes ago.
Yes.
But the point here is that the National Communication Council is dealing with what they have in hand. And when you met the other day and you had clips of what you're talking about, what was the general reaction there?
Well, the reaction was very positive towards that. There was condemnation of what we refer to as hate language or hate speech. But then, the way forward, somebody would ask, what do you do? I think when Terry talks about certain people considering themselves as almost above the law, and they can take decisions, and nothing is done to reprimand them, to stop them from doing certain things. They continue to do it.
Did you resolve on the way forward when you met to try to educate journalists? Because we are entering a very crucial phase.
The council will continue. What we said was the council will continue to do what we've started doing and try to sensitize the people on the negative aspects, the impact, the negative impact hate speech can have on a given society.
I think I can put in I think the first just bringing out the problem, especially the clips that were shown. I mean, they caught everybody off guard. Just bringing it out, diagnosing it, it dawned on us that we are really going towards the wrong direction. But now it is left for individuals to see this as a problem and take action. Often it's not policy that solves problem. Someone asked a question there during the seminar that if I attend, one of your guys who always attend your CCA, asked the question, if I attend a political rally and someone speaks hate speech from start to the end, as a reporter, what do you do? I report or should I go home without a report? And he thought he was going to pin the professor in the small corner, but the professor said no. And it comes back to what you said. People should be auto-regulated.
If you're with us, then come on.
People should be auto-regulated. Yes. Media houses should have their policy. This is not healthy. Yes, you have attended the rally. It is hate speech from the beginning. But what is your own editorial policy? And from a good conscience, does that build society or destroy society? I think when there is no common law, people should start acting in good faith and by good conscience to serve as the law.
Okay, the gatekeepers themselves.
Yes.
Okay, we have Teke. Good day.
Hello, Joe.
Yeah.
We have quite a good number of followers on our different platforms, and to indicate that this program is live on our website www.crtv.cm. And let's begin with this one from Kwa Akongwingwa, who says, personally, I believe that hate speech can be curbed if and only if government encourages and instills a spirit of patriotism and love for one another in all its activities and endeavors. While, as Eman says, the only way that this hate language can be repressed is only by giving sanctions to those who use it within the country or even abroad. René Girez says if the Anglophone crisis is solved satisfactorily, hate speech will disappear. While Prince Matopane Obase Mudika says we start by loving and treating everyone as human beings and stop attacking people based on their groups, race, religion, sex, etc., etc. It would help to curb hate speech. And we end with Kamto Robert Mungwa, who says, where there is love and equity and respect for each and everyone, there will be no hate speech.
Thank you very much.
I agree. I think some of the things that they say is
now, the big question is, with the present dispensation, what I would want the President of the National Communication Council to send a word to those who propagate hate speech.
Joe, I don't know what other word I'm going to send to them, but that they should desist from using any language that can destroy a society, that can raise spirits, incite spirits to rebellion. It has happened. Let me give you an example. The Sultan of Fumban called me and was screaming on the phone because a certain media house had come up to say that the Bamon people are xenophobic, that they don't accept other people of the other regions to come to their, because they eventually killed, because that's what he said, killed a certain professor or a principal of a school in Fumba. I mean, and that was a bad name being given to another group of people, that they are xenophobic, they are murderers. Please, we can't stop using such verbal, let me say, destructive viciousness. We can get ourselves to speak journalism, that is, if we're journalists at all. And that's where, you know, that's my job, to try to regulate the content in terms of language. That's the job of the council, to regulate the ethics and the deontology of the profession.
Thank you very much. We don't have enough time. We would have continued. Apparently, it looks like a hot potato, given the times we're living. Thank you so much for coming, gentlemen. We're looking forward to seeing you again on the set. And stay with CRTV if you can. Tam Tam Weekend is following shortly. Good day.